what if I were to say to you that feelings were inherently meaningless and that each of us spend a great deal of our time and energy actively lying to ourselves and deceiving other people? Two quite lofty statements, two rather contrarian statements, and two statements which I want to unpack and explain so that hopefully you'll understand a bit of what I mean and what I'm trying to get us in touch with over the course of the next few minutes of the video. So the first part of that, saying feelings are meaningless, I'm saying that because really what feelings are about is just basically a natural byproduct of our experience. They don't necessarily have a lot of power and or importance and or meaning. The issue becomes, and the issue arises because we basically fixate, we attach, we tie up these complex knots of our thoughts and our feelings and our justifications for the feelings and our stories why we shouldn't have them and the ones we should have and the ones we shouldn't. And basically what we do is we take this natural responsive quality that we all have and we kind of congest it and put a whole layer of standardization and homogeny and a lot of just constraints on that natural process. Because just like if you walk into a room, your body's going to naturally respond to the temperature, to the humidity, the oxygen levels, the kind of energy in the room, meaning if people were just arguing or if people were happy, you're just going to respond, and it's not really a big deal. Likewise, if you witness an event in your life, you're going to have a natural response. That's just kind of part of being alive. And the issue really arises because many of us have been through rough experiences, right? And what happens is, at the time, maybe we couldn't really deal with it, or we didn't want to deal with it, or it was kind of too much, and somehow it becomes trapped within our system. And depending on the nature of that experience and the nature of the feeling that we had, it's going to typically go to certain areas of the body and accumulate in that area. So we'll be really tight and tense there, have less blood circulation there, have less energy circulation, and eventually some kind of injury or disease will set in because there's not really any movement or circulation in there. And that's not necessarily weird or esoteric because we understand that that's life. Breathing is life, is circulation. Your heart beating is life, is circulation. And if those things stop or don't work very well, you're probably not going to feel good. Eating, same process. You stop doing it or it doesn't really work efficiently, you're not going to feel as good. So this is not weird or esoteric. It's something that we all basically already know, but we choose to not really acknowledge and or accept and or allow into our experience. So this is really important because there's so much emphasis these days on people having kind of enforced cathartic experiences, and oftentimes people confuse spirituality or consciousness practices with just basic catharsis. People think spirituality is going to a festival and taking hallucinogens and dancing and having this peak state. That's just a peak state. That's just a chemical ride. It has nothing to do necessarily with spirituality. It's not to say that it's not valuable, it's not useful, because like I'm talking about moving and movement, that's a very useful thing. And the problem arises because each of us will basically construct our identity around primarily one of these kind of basic emotions, whether it's anger or fear or sadness and despair, or excessive joy, almost like manic kind of behavior, or excessive worry. And our basic life script will be a somewhat variation upon that theme. So therein lies the meaning. The meaning isn't in the feeling, the meaning is in how we are attaching to it and why we are choosing to attach to it and wrap ourselves and limit our experience to basically those things, because that is really what's leading us to discomfort and disease. Because basically, long story short, emotion is just energy in motion. It's a natural response that we're having all the time. The problem is that also each of us are a bit different. So people pressure us to be certain ways or to be like them is usually what it means. And some people are deeply feeling and deeply sensitive, but on the outside you really wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking. And sometimes some of the most sensitive people that I've known can appear to others to be other than that. And sometimes the people that are actually the most dense and insensitive can externally appear to be very gushy and very just almost volatile in their reactions. So both extremes that I'm kind of talking about are just simply different ways things can manifest, but we have to understand that each of us is going to be a bit different. So that standardization is something we need to break through and get in touch with what we actually feel and who we actually are versus what we're being pressured to be externally. For men and women, this is an important thing. Men tend to be pressured to, bottle everything up and keep everything inside and have this tough exterior. Women can be the opposite, but actually, both of those things can do everyone kind of a disservice, depending on a person's nature and their makeup. So that's kind of the first piece about what I mean for feelings being meaningless, which leads us to the second part, which is that we're all basically actively lying to ourselves and other people. We are lying to ourselves and other people because the majority of the time what we think is the issue is not actually the issue, because we want to only deal within the world of comfort. And we don't want to tap into the world of discomfort and unknown, which is usually where the real things are lying. And actually, most of life is uncomfortable and uncertain, and most of our strategies are just to basically like medicate ourselves from that reality. So how we are actively lying to ourselves is that, let's say we say, oh, well, I have this like diet issue and I have my digestion and I have this, I don't know what to eat, and go on this whole story. Well, really what that often comes back to is basically, we could just say in a simple, some kind of self-worth kind of thing. In a lot of videos I talk about self-hatred, and this is kind of a bit of what I'm trying to point at, is that perhaps, just for example, to make up a story, person says, I just can't figure out what to eat, and I binge eat, and I have all these extremes of how I'm eating. Sometimes I don't eat, and then I eat excessively, and I'm all over the place. Okay, and then most practitioners, most medicine will just say, oh, well, we'll give you herbs, and we'll give you this diet, and we'll touch these magical points, and we'll give you all these things, and that will fix you. And yeah, that'll probably do some good, but then it's just going to kind of be this weird, like kind of like a bit of a battle. And then we could dig deeper and say, oh, okay, well, perhaps really what the dynamic is that's there is some issue around your self-worth, because maybe you didn't get what you thought you deserved from some parent or some role model in your life, or you were abused, or some situation took your idea of your worth and really undermined it and caused you to question it. And that's just one way we could look at it, and that's really what we could go to. But that's not really where it should stop, because then we say, okay, well, let's nip this behavior in the bud, like right now. Who is this person, or what is the situation, and how can you basically actively face it head on and shift the way you're relating to it, or the way you're showing up, or the way you're choosing to show up in the world or not. And I just mentioned this because, like I said earlier, too many modalities just focus on catharsis or positive thinking or affirmations, or just dragging you out through 40 years of therapy, talking about this, talking about that, whining about how in second grade your teacher was mean to you, and then how that makes you feel now. And you could just see how it could get so just not helpful. You could just dissolve and spiral down into just deeper layers of deception and lying to yourself. And a long story short, what I mean by how we're lying to ourselves is because we make up all these little issues to avoid dealing with the real issues. We make up all these little things, up here on the leaves of the tree to avoid addressing the roots. And that's largely because our basic understanding of the nature of feelings and emotions is incorrect, realizing that they don't really have a lot of meaning and value. They're just kind of natural byproducts of experience, and they shouldn't be repressed, and they also shouldn't be elevated. And I think as a culture, we have a hard time with that. People want to go to one extreme or the other, but it's because we don't understand. And then on the flip side, we're actively lying to ourselves and other people because unless we are actually willing to penetrate to the depth within ourselves, we're not really going to see it in other people. So majority of practitioners and people that go through the healing system, meaning schooling, never actually get to a depth in their own human experience, and they're relying on modalities, they're relying on systems, relying on artificial constructs and standardization to basically just take your standardization and replace it with other standardization. Like, oh, your negative standardization is what's wrong with you, so here's some positive standardization. When in reality, both miss the mark because they're still not really in touch with what the actual process of life is, who we actually are, what the nature of our experience might actually be, and lacking the understanding of the nature of these things. Now, that's not to say it's ever going to be easy. Like, there's no magical place you get to. There's no ultimate end goal. Everything is basically just another middle. Meaning you get $10,000, then you want 20. You get $1 million, then you want 10. You get a 6-pack, then you want an 8-pack. That's just kind of the nature of the mind, but it's also the nature of our experience. If you just look around, it kind of always feels like you're in the middle, because you are. Kind of feels like you're always just in the middle of the stone, which is kind of closer to where our experience is, but then also everything else feels the same thing as well. So hopefully that's been helpful and shed some insight on kind of just basic themes for understanding healing and disease and how we're choosing to show up in the world and basically express ourselves in a rather contrarian way, which is not really placing a value system on either of these things. It's basically trying to just understand a bit more of a neutral place, meaning feelings aren't good or bad, right or wrong, excessive or whatever. It's just basically how we choose to relate to them when we really fixate on them, instead of just really getting in touch with what they actually are and understanding them, which takes time and takes energy and requires being able to be comfortable with discomfort. So again, hopefully that's been helpful. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll talk to you soon.